Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, welcome to the episode 6 now of the Diversity Minded podcast with myself, James, and the lovely.
Melissa.
There we go. So, today's episode is going to be somewhat of a special, I'd say, and it's actually going to be on a crazy new concept that you've just introduced to me. So, this is just as new for me, folks, as it is for you. Red monkeys, if anyone's ever heard of that term, and the diversity and diversity mindedness in general, unlocking new perspectives. So, we're going to be diving into that because red monkeys by itself makes no context, but it's a fun term. It's a fun term, and I like it. So it's more about that. It's a personality archetype within a business, isn't it, Melissa? The kind of the red monkey per se. So walk us through it. What is a red monkey? How do you identify? What zoo are we in? What's going on?
We're not, we're in the jungle and we're
Yes.
both red monkeys. But thanks, James. So I only discovered red monkeys in the past week. I was telling somebody about the diversity mindedness and how important it is to surround yourself with people who don't think or behave like you do in order to really gain that traction and change that you desire. And he talked about this guy, Jeff Stays, who came up with the red monkeys concept and how red monkeys, they stand out. And they're innovative thinkers that challenge the status quo. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So yeah, that's it. That's
Sweet.
it. That's
Yeah.
it. That's us. And that they are in the DISC personality profiling,
Mm.
where dominance, influence, steadiness, compliance, low compliance, those not being able to really, or not interested in process and rules and lots of information and being restricted by constructs that were there before them. Low compliance would be very similar in the description to the red monkeys.
Yeah. So I suppose the term itself then, and just does someone self-identify as a red monkey, or is this more from the perspective, what I'm trying to figure out, from the perspective of a manager or an individual, where you're looking at it, let's say from a manager perspective, you're going, okay, if I'm going to kind of categorize my team here in terms of the personality types, I'm looking at them and going, okay, I've got a couple of red monkeys in the jungle right now. How do I work best with them? Or is it from an individual point of view to know that actually, part of your personality and makeup is needing that curiosity? You need to innovate. You can't just be stuck in this rule set. What's it more for? In terms of managerial or personal or both?
Oh, that really good question. So I think that this is more and the jungle would be the environment they're in, right? So ideally, it'll be a an environment that breeds more red monkeys. And what they're saying, what I guess the premise of, from what I understand, and so I'm not an expert, and I'd
Need to
love
get
to
Jeff on the
get
show,
Jeff's
Mr. Monkey
advice on
himself.
this. Right. So he's written a book about it, and it talks about that red monkeys, because they're innovative and they like to try new things and they stand out, often, if organizations don't know how to deal with them, they can be like squashed.
Mm,
People who don't like change, and typical organizations that are fearful of change would almost crush these red monkeys in their organizations because they'd be seen as troublemakers. I mean, there's actually the connection of both groups. So challenge norms help teams to embrace, like, foster creativity and innovation. But the key characteristics of red monkeys, so creative and innovative,
hmm
tick for you, right? That would be
Somewhat, yeah,
you,
yeah, yeah.
right? Nonconformists, so they tend to reject rigid structures and traditional ways of thinking.
Mm.
They're risk taking, so they're comfortable with uncertainty and they push boundaries beyond what they see as possible. They're resilient, so they can also be persistent because they feel so strongly about their ideas, and they're change agents, so they inspire others to think differently. So that those are the key characteristics of a monkey, and I would say, in when you're deep diving into DISC, the key characteristics of low compliance, independent of thought,
Mm.
being able to challenge the status quo, all of those things come up and seem very aligned.
And it's actually quite interesting to put like a name to the face per se, I guess, because you know I've always just classified myself as I just think I'm a really bad employee. Like it's not
Right.
it's not that I am like disrespectful per se. It's just that I have this need fundamentally to just be given something, trusted to do it, and do it in a way that makes the most sense. And if I come into something and go, I think we should do it that way because of X, Y, and Z reason, and it's actually factually correct. It's not like I think the again low C in a workplace can be misinterpreted as it's either their way or the highway, or they think they're always right, or actually most of the time they probably are, or at least if you bring evidence to the table, because that's what I've done previously. And if it's just shot down immediately because that's just not the way things are, that's what will just infuriate you know the red monkeys to go crazy in the zoo, and then it's Planet the Apes and everything's over. So I suppose the advice to managers, that's probably where my head goes, because I, I'm one, so I know how to operate with one. But if someone is somewhere else on the disc spectrum, or they're another colour monkey, whatever phrasing we're using, how do managers better work with red monkeys and leaders, because they can be so powerful an asset, or it can be completely wasted. I think that there's only going to be two ways it's going to go. So, what's the best way to work with people with low compliance?
So when you talk about the zoos, organizations usually have a hierarchy that is like a zoo structure, confined. You have your lane, stay in your lane, James. And it's interesting that you say that you've thought of yourself as a bad employee, but actually most organizations, because, you know, they need stability and security and predictability often
Mm-hmm.
to maintain, just so things don't go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They would need to there would need to be some of that, but the identifying, I think that's why I'm so passionate about this, the way that you can give a personality assessment and immediately be able to see where people sit, because those red monkeys, they're the ones who become disillusioned with an organization. They're like, I never get listened to. We have to do the same thing. It's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. But the stronger personality types who maybe might crave security, or the managers who don't like change, they don't want to be coming up against red monkeys that are often very stubborn. Well, if you're talking about low compliance, very stubborn and can be headstrong.
Mm. Are there any little things that a workplace can do? Because if we're talking about especially larger organisations, things are the way things are, and they would have to go to, even minor changes might have to go through 3 to 4 layers of approval, and then everyone has to be trained on this new way of thinking. Sometimes change like that feels like fiscally impossible unless it is that ultra efficient. Are there any little things that managers or leaders can do in terms of how tasks are given, the flexibility, even the way feedback is delivered? In your experience, have you seen any little techniques like that just help the everyday?
Well, if you're able to at least have an open dialogue about, your preferences, and build and make sure that it's a balance between allowing that creativity and innovation whilst maintaining some of the structural requirements that organizations need.
Mm.
I think that balancing those two really starts with having honest and open conversations, and being able to communicate without immediately shutting someone down. So if they're like, "Oh, James is coming up with an idea again and it's never been tried before, and we're not ready for that yet," rather than stifling you and saying, "No, James, that's another idea that isn't going to work," how can they consider when they might be ready to try that? Because otherwise, if you just keep hearing no, you're going to stop coming up with ideas. And in fact, you're probably what would it be like to you if if you're working with an organization and they're pretty set in a traditional way of working for their marketing. Let's talk about content creation. And you're coming up with all these ideas. Have you come up with against, older type more status quo bias organizations that don't want to change?
It's my entire career. Um, Yeah, so I always see, from a marketing point of view, a fundamental dissonance between senior leaders, C-suite, and the people on the ground that are making content or approving campaigns. I never really saw it make much sense how, especially if it goes to a board level, and you're doing, or just a kind of senior leader level, and they're not as experienced in marketing or not as experienced in the newer techniques or how social works now, and they are the final say in what goes out and what doesn't. And often it kind of will go up a chain and go, I don't get it. Why aren't we doing something that's more direct sales? And through certain channels, direct sales does work, especially if it's an e-commerce basis. Paid advertising, performance marketing is really important. But the game has changed so much that it's the education gap is actually insane, and it's not actually kind of junior or mid-level teams I think need educating. It's seniors, because they have climbed to where they've got to, and there's an assumption that knowledge is what keeps them up there. But it's changed so much that they might as well be juniors again in terms of how a lot of things are seen. And
Mm.
I think a lot of people don't actually want to accept the fact that they don't know enough on the particular subject, at least from my experience, because from being in organisations that are that rigid and inflexible, and then just pointing out the common sense answer and still getting shot down, I'll immediately start looking for jobs on that lunch break. I'll be like, I'm done. I think I went through like 4 or 5 different marketing roles before I started my own business. I felt like I was forced into my self-employment a little bit, but also working with certain clients, where in my experience that their objectives are so rigid, or they're given from a board or leaders that aren't marketers, that when you're like, we want X many of that, and you go, okay, what we can do is we can build up some momentum here. If we do some brand work here, I think we'll get to this point. They go, no, just do that. Just blindly advertise it. I want ROI now. And it's just like, that doesn't look like that, bro. It just doesn't. I'm sorry. People don't just buy things from a brand. They have no idea who they are, especially if it's some kind of B2B or event. It is the most frustrating reality for us marketers, and especially for the poor internal marketers, which is why agencies still exist, even though outsourcing your marketing doesn't really make much sense if you think about it. But they've been told no by people that don't get it so often, they stop coming up with ideas, just like you said. And there's some people that accept the reality, just come and get their paycheck and go home. And then there's others that are like, refuse to back down. And that was me for a time. So yes, more education, more education to help understand these things, because
Mm.
otherwise it's just frustrating. But also, if you're in a business or a junior or mid-level, and you can't really be like, can I educate you on this? Because it feels like you're directly challenging the chain of command. It feels like your job is at threat. If you have the gall to go, you don't know niche, basically. That's what you really need to go. Like, you don't get it. But that's why I do what I do, and I try my best.
And well, so a lot of those leaders, if they don't, and this is a really good opportunity to have an honest self-reflection of actually my personality is risk adverse. I don't like change, or I don't feel comfortable with change, and I need a lot of evidence to prove that something's going to work before I make a decision to try something new.
Mm,
If you know that that is your likely behavior, then and other people know that too. I think that that's where the open dialogues for organizations, because this red monkeys theory, they're saying it supports the whole diversity minded concept that organizations who want long term sustainability and growth will not evolve fast enough compared to their competition if they have everybody that like the group think,
mm,
or if they stick with the status quo. The world is changing. You need to change. You need to move at pace.
yeah.
And the innovative ideas they're not innovative once other people have thought of them and implemented them.
Yeah, yeah. It's always I see it all the time. It's like, oh, that other brand's done it, it worked. We'll do that now. I actively avoid doing competitor research as much as humanly possible for any brand I work with, which seems odd for a marketer, but especially when it comes to creative. As soon as you start seeing other brands in your space, you will subconsciously want to copy, or you will subconsciously lean towards whatever their successful thing has been, and it will interact. It will interfere with your own individuality. It's just,
Of course.
yeah. Even if it is successful, it won't be as successful for you because you can't just copy it. Like, it
Mm,
makes me want to like shake people, like, don't do that. At least from a unique creative point of view of how an audience will see it, as opposed to what the numbers might show. And I think this is again a difference between maybe the more data and analytical individuals versus the more creative individuals. I like a perfect Venn diagram of how they both cross over, ideally, but a lot of the times, creative, especially in advertising, data doesn't support creativity half the time, because if someone goes, if we think back to some of our like favorite advertising, for instance, like, do you remember the Tango adverts where it was someone just slapping you on the face with both hands, and it's like, you've just been tangoed? That was like one of our most successful ads in the UK, right?
mm. I
um,
wasn't here at that time.
I would love to see any data that would have supported slapping someone in the face sells tango.
Well, I actually really enjoyed so, but I like that idea of if you see something first, then, or you're hanging around and you're thinking with people, then the likelihood of you building those biases for yourself. I
Mm.
mean, you talked about a couple of episodes ago the Jaguar ad, and I have to say, I really like it. I think it's really creative and different. And I love the new look of the two cars
Yeah.
that they advertise. I don't understand what the all the fuss is about, to be honest. But can you
I think
imagine the
true car people hate it, don't they? Because electric cars are always not really their favourite to begin with, and then when it looks so like intentionally futury, they're like, "Oh, classic car." I'm like, who cares, bro? Shut up. Carry on.
but I think but at least people are talking about it, right? At
Hmm.
least they dared to be different.
Oh yeah, they definitely win in this scenario, no matter what. Like, even if they end up reversing or coming up with some new classical mixture and bringing back some of their old stuff, or even reverting back to the brand to begin with, all that negative press, they'll still win. Like, that's how our news cycle works. The old saying of like any press is good press still works.
Hmm.
Like, unless it's some heinous atrocity, then you still win. Like, a bad brand that turns into a meme, guess what? Now your brand's everywhere.
Yeah, or they say that if everybody likes you and nobody hates you, then you're just playing it too safe.
Yeah, they got
Like
up
if
on
you have,
stage. One of their senior leaders was just like, "Oh, we're not doing this for everyone." And I was like, "Yeah, they get it." Like, they knew how this was going to go. Guaranteed, they polled it beforehand. They did many a study, focus groups, the whole lot, and they saw how polarized the response would be. They
hmm,
go, polarized world, polarizing brand, that'll sell.
hmm.
Guarantee that was a strategy. Again, probably pulling from modern politics, as it always tends to go back to that in terms of media cycles now.
Oh, well, why? Oh, yeah, we'll get into that another time. Okay, so why does this matter? Why does it matter to have diversity of thought within organizations, and why do red monkeys, why would they be core to an organization's success?
You don't get any innovative strategy or creativity without a red monkey. Usually, you will get something by the numbers, or something that seems statistically safe, or something that's on some kind of trending board. Like, not to say that you have to be an internal anarchist to be creative. I don't necessarily buy that, but usually the most bold innovation happens from people with those kind of archetype personalities. But it's just about figuring out who those people are in your organization and then harnessing that, instead of it being a thorn in your side. Let it be the sword at your hip. It's kind of
Yeah,
like saying, I'm off the top of my noggin, but
that was pretty good. Well, I was speaking to this incredible uh, technologist. So, well, I say he's a technologist, but he was a leading Gartner analyst,
mm,
and his profile came up with a low compliance. And I thought, oh God, I just want to hang out with people that all have low compliance because then I feel like we could all support each other. He asked a really good question. He said that a lot of the people in his team also likely were quite like him with the low compliance.
Mm.
And is that a good thing? And I was like, well, if they understand, if they have a leader who understands what can be frustrating, which nothing frustrates a low compliant red monkey more than thinking of something that's really innovative and creative and just being shot down.
Mm.
Like, of
You can
course,
only
you
take
can't
a
do
certain
everything.
amount of those. Yeah, like it builds up, and you eventually internally give up. It's the same as any rejection or dating or whatever. Like, get a
Mm,
certain amount of no's, you stop asking.
right.
Like, just the way it works.
Yeah, although my first fiance would say persistence beats resistance.
That is certainly a strategy. Certainly a strategy. Um, which, in turn, if I'm thinking out of it in a business sense, actually, it probably is the right tactic to go with. And I think it comes with it. Like, I think a lot of my lived experiences being stupid as this is going to sound, a young red monkey in an organization, to be a young chimp in the jungle, and you're just so much stuff bothers you, but you don't have the social status to say anything.
Right.
And I think that happens to a lot of young people in any kind of industry, and it's until you've gone through a certain amount of, for lack of a better word, bullshit, for you to go, oh, she's going to say it now. Like, or I'm pretty much safe if I say that. And you figure out where your organisation's at, or what you can and can't say, where that line is. Maybe someone else makes a mistake before you. You're like, noted. And you kind of it's about playing the game ultimately. And I think learning to play that game is an unfortunate part of corporate life, I'd say.
Yeah, but see, that's why you left. And that's what actually, so because I'm like, oh, I could never play the game. I could never play the corporate game. I could never bite my tongue. I had it was like Tourette's. I could not look at somebody as if they were an idiot if they were just blatantly doing something that didn't make any sense for the sake of policy and procedure. Um, and that's, career limiting for sure. But that's where my frustration is. I had to prove myself beyond anybody else and achieve success to enable me to feel confident enough to kind of challenge back. Whereas, like, why should we have to do that? Just because we are thinking different, like, we're assets to organizations.
Mm.
It's almost like they should build a little mini island where we all hang out so that
Yeah,
creativity and innovation, then they just like take each of the ideas, but at least we're happy and we're thriving and
yeah.
and we're
Or,
breeding because
or everyone's just arguing with each other. Just like everyone's got, no, my idea is better than your idea. It's all just going crazy. Um, no, but it is interesting. Like,
well, but hold on, can I just say
mm,
it's not that they're trying to compete on ideas. Usually people with low compliance, or what I understand from this red monkey, is that it's for the betterment of a situation. It's not like they're just going out there with egos, although maybe egos could be at play if they want their idea implemented and it'll give them great rewards. But
mm,
usually the fight is for justice and like this isn't fair. If you don't implement this isn't fair. That feeling, have
yeah.
you felt that a lot? This isn't
Yeah,
fair.
and this will go into the neurodivergent of us. Both symptoms of ADHD and autism is a strong sense of justice. Now, that doesn't mean that every one of us turned into a police officer or a barrister or something like that. It mainly means that, like, yeah, it's that, like you said, that fairness in any and all interactions. And if you feel like you've been wronged, whether or not ego's the initial motivator, egos will be hurt if the situation doesn't pan out the way that person's internal justice has aligned, if that makes
Mm,
sense.
that's
So if each scenario doesn't go the way that it's pictured in that person, because especially your neurodivergent folk, like, for me personally, when I have a meeting tomorrow that I know I'll have to do a lot of speaking and pontificating on, I have run about 10 to 15 to 20 different scenarios or talking points or even eloquent pontifications that I'm going to say that has already been run in the simulation. Very Jarvis, very Iron Man, right? That's all been run through the night before. We've already practiced it 100 times in our head. And some people do that just for the bracing yourself for that first hello at the coffee machine the next day, because social interactions and social cues are sometimes more difficult. So when you've put so much planning and effort into an interaction, sometimes when it doesn't go the way you had already run the scenarios for and the simulations, you're like, this is annoying, this sucks. And it can literally just be as simple as, I'm going to walk past that desk and check in on that person and ask if they want a coffee, and you remember their coffee order, so you know this is going to be impactful and part of the game we're going to play. This is how I used to think. And then I walk by and I go, do you want a coffee, mate? Like, no. I'm like, well, that didn't turn out the way I thought. Now what do I do? And it could stuff as small as that, but a lot, and again, unless you're doing the personality testing, figuring out who's in your team, you have no idea that's going on in their brain. Someone neurotypical will have absolutely no concept of what I just talked about there. But anyone on the spectrum will be like, yes, I understand, Magic Man. So yeah, that so much that goes into it. So much goes into it.
So when you were talking, I was imagining when, not that I wasn't listening to you because I was, but
See, this is what we're both doing. We're desperately trying to hold on to the next point that we remembered. But yeah, carry on. Go for it.
yeah, I think I kind of lost it. But I think that, okay, tell me, where were we at?
So this is what we need, a third co-host that's just not
Structured.
neurospicy. We need a very we just need someone who's like a standard human being here that can just guide the conversation. Jesus. Okay. Sense of justice.
Oh, yes. So
That's the word.
the fairness, you imagine having your abilities and your capabilities, and you now knowing that you are contributing to the success of multi-billion-dollar companies, right? So you've helped really, really big brands, and yet having confidence and innovation knocked out of you from a really young age, that could have sent you in different directions. You could have totally lost confidence and been like, forget this, I'm not going to go down this path because clearly I'm not good at it. But you persevered, you had the resilience to continue. And actually, I talk about red monkeys having resilience to keep going. And we both have resilience to keep going, even when nobody gets necessarily in the moment what we're doing. I guess that one thing that organizations must be so conscious of is the well-being of people who don't blend in, and these red monkeys that have a lot to offer, but who can, if beaten down or not listened to, it could actually go really wrong for these people. I would imagine that that's where people start drinking or taking drugs or, getting some kind of pain relief from not being understood or just feeling so different.
Isolation is insane. Like to a lesser degree, my first corporate role, and I think a long enough time has passed since I first did this. But I chose a corporate role right at university, and it did not gel with me to such an extreme that I think 6 months in, I just stood up from my desk, I walked out, and I never came back. Just because I was just having my Matrix moment of this can't be all it is. I did not just go through like 10 years of school to sit here and take this to legal and take that to that department. There's no shot that that's all there is, because I just could not handle it, because I expected to do some kind of marketing. But I think, and that was just the nature of in-house work, which I didn't know, was not explained well enough. So universities and colleges need to do a much better job of really kind of showing what happens on a day-to-day basis in these kind of jobs. But the other thing to think about is, I saw absolutely zero impact probably on what my actions were doing on the latter end for like my first few jobs. So until I joined my first smaller business, which was probably like 3 roles in, I had no idea how impactful what I was doing was. I had no idea how much of a difference I was making, the numbers I was generating, because that report will probably go to a senior that you'll never see or they'll talk about in a meeting, even though you could have had the idea that triggered something incredible. But unless those wins are shared with you, you'll just constantly be putting shit out into the ether. I feel like nothing's coming back to you, and it will just frustrate you to the nth degree, especially if you're already in a rigid structure that you feel like even more of your ideas are held back. So it's like having a hydro dam and not switching it on. Just all the water stuck behind the dam and it's not being used. That's the thing that comes to my head in terms of the analogy. It's an eternally frustrating process. But if that person was aware how much of a difference they're making, it might not be so frustrating.
So the impact, that's a really good point, because how many roles out there are direct, do they not? So it was difficult for me. It was easy to see the impact. I could see
Mm.
how I was affecting revenue generation as a
Nice.
salesperson. In marketing, well, especially if you're not at the top
The bigger
of,
you go, the harder it is to see if you're a junior, basically,
yeah,
because a lot of things are pre-decided. If you're in-house, even if you're agency side, the results, if you're talking about advertising, so above the line, TV, radio, print, stuff like that, the results aren't really as present as they could be, or your contributions either aren't acknowledged enough because you're just part of a massive machine.
well, how could organizations better articulate the impact that all roles are having? I guess that's a good question to ask. Does anything come top of mind for you?
And a lot of organisations could do this already, but we're just not aware. It's statistical transparency and how we can attribute certain actions to how a number got to where they are.
Mm.
So in creative, it can be a bit easier, and this is why in-house marketing roles or in-house marketers, I think, will always struggle more with this because they're often working with an agency or multiple agencies that they've often commissioned to come up with ideas and come back to them. So their contribution to the actual ad at the end of it is often a case of tweaking an idea that came to you or approving things if you're on a junior to mid-level at least. And for me personally, that wasn't that satisfying because I felt like I wasn't coming up with this idea. I didn't feel like I had any impact on it at all. But if you can go, oh, that tweak you made to the copy, we A/B tested it and we found that the fact that we used sign up now instead of learn more, that did a 20% extra sales, mate, and that was you.
Yeah.
So, but can be a very complicated process depending on the industry or the company or whatever. And some companies may do this well already, but statistical transparency is just vital for going. That number's you, kid. You just did an extra million there. Well done.
So your influence is quite high on your chart. And so high influence also what they value is peer recognition. So that would be
Yeah.
especially important to you to get the recognition for your work. And here's another reason why understanding your profile is so important, because if you know that, another person's might be um, getting an additional challenge, and so they get bigger and bigger challenges, or just getting hey, your job is safe for another year because you've been doing well.
Yeah.
So, so depending on what drives the motivations and the behaviors of someone, feedback given in a way that's meaningful to them is really important. So,
Yeah.
how what else makes you feel like, how do you know if you've done a good job? What's important to you from a client's perspective? Let's say they've gotten 1 million TikTok views on the content you've created. What would you like from them to as a as recognition to what
Mm.
you've done?
It's an interesting question. So obviously, from an agency owner perspective, continuing to pay your invoice is the most important thing.
Yeah, more
Um,
money, please.
yeah,
Thanks.
money. because ultimately that's the service they're paying for. That's more of a transactional in interaction. But if I was working inside a company and I did that
And
kind of thing,
mm,
I think it then takes a different form, because if I think back to although I do tell these stories about how I view corporate in a somewhat negative fashion, I have had a job or two that I have enjoyed, and it's because they gave pretty much full trust after they seen I could really handle what I was doing, and they started to trust some of these ideas I was putting out there, even if not all of them hit, because they won't. But actually, when they ran with something or they ran with something else, they'd be like, "That was good. That was actually really good." And in those one-on-ones, addressing like how well you're doing, it seems very basic. But if the trust isn't given first, or the ideas aren't listened to, when someone tells you you're doing well, you don't believe it. It's like the same as when I won't go into relationship analogies, but like actions matter more than words, shall we say? Um,
yes.
um, so, and then, but because I got trusted with ideas and I got that positive reinforcement, I was going to war for them. I was doing overtime out of the gills. I was doing extra certifications on the side because I got addicted to that feeling of success and internal success. I wanted to be a killer. I wanted to be the best person in that organization. I wanted everyone to walk by me if it was slightly intimidated by my creative genius. Like that was, but that was maybe the way I'm weirdly wired. But that's how I took it. But because I was given those tidbits, and I could see the impact, they ran with my ideas. They trusted in they were creating a monster, and they didn't know it was good. And that's why it's one of the only jobs that I truly enjoyed. So actual
Interesting.
proven trust, listening and implementing the ideas. Because you can listen to an idea and go, "That's a great idea." But if you never see that idea resurface, I was like, "Well, they were just saying that in the meeting to make me shut up." You can tell it's like a coping mechanism. So occasionally listening to the red monkey who's rattling at their cage might actually be a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, being able to, and that need for validation, I think when you're so different from the majority that you
Mm,
surround yourself with, and when you, let's say, a red monkey in a jungle and you stand out, having that positive validation that you're good and what you're doing is great and we really appreciate that. My God, because I think it comes so rarely, or I think that it's
I
far
completely agree with
less
it.
than
Yeah.
the why, the no's and the complications or the stifling status quo crushers. Like those are the, I think that the need for that validation, it's definitely factored into what's important to me, which is sad because that means that I need to go externally to get the validation without just inherently knowing I'm
Mm,
a red monkey. Not everybody's going to understand me, and that's actually okay because
yeah.
I'm awesome at what I do, and
Mm.
there are going to be people that don't get it, and those people I don't have time for them anyway.
Yeah, I think there's two layers to that. One, obviously, you or any other person who identifies more with the low compliance red monkey thing, they're human too. So that even if you have extremely good self assurance and self confidence behind the scenes, it will still get through to you. And I think workplace self esteem and personal life self esteem are almost very separate at times, because there's been times in my life where I've had terrible personal self esteem, but work I was unstoppable. Work was where I was the king, and no one was going to knock me off my perch. So in that sense, it can be very different mentalities you can have in different places. So that's definitely something to point out. But also, I think it's a very ADHD thing, or neurodivergent thing, to get that positive reinforcement, that shot of serotonin or whatever the chemical may be, to get you through that particular task. Because sometimes a lot of what we have to do at work is super boring, right? And if as dopamine was what I was after, if the correct amount of, like, let's say if we complete an email and send it, so I'm talking from an ADHD community point of view, if I send off the emails I was supposed to send off today, I don't have any sense of achievement. I have a sense of relief when it's finished. There's no pattern on the back there. So it's almost like the stakes are higher for everything we do. We need a higher sense of reward for those things we do. And it's how It's how that's delivered. So for mine, it was like, bigging me up, or like accepting my ideas was that shot of dopamine that I wanted. And then I was super engaged. I was hunting after that dopamine consistently, because it was like, if I get that now, I'm going to level up the next time. Then the dopamine will be even bigger. Then, healthy or not, made me very productive. So in that sense, if you have someone like that on your crew, that's when, again, you have a secret weapon there. You kind of have no idea. It could be sitting dormant within your organization. It could be really interesting to tap into if you give them that sense of reward.
Do you think, though, that because, so I'm going to go back to that because that's an interesting, what you said earlier about maybe not having the confidence on your, like, relationship wise or personally. And
Mm.
I can definitely empathize with that. But I almost needed my success in work to validate the lack of confidence I felt in the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
And my successes at work and my achievements meant that, like, that was my badge of pride, because I didn't really fit in or feel understood in my personal environments.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so success becomes a driver and a big validation, because that's otherwise, you've got to do some deep work to
Yeah.
uncover
People's
the other.
hunger, people's hunger will always come from somewhere.
Mhm.
I've talked about many different things before, probably on this show as well. That, like, I think I started my business out of vengeance, not a purpose. It was, I'll prove everybody wrong. That was the driver. That was the chip on my shoulder. Like, everyone will have something like that, whether you're climbing the corporate ladder, starting your own business, or whatever it happens to be. Everyone's got some stuff. Everyone's got some baggage. And it's hard to even talk or broach that in a corporate setting, or a business setting in general, even if it's a startup. But just asking the little questions here and there, like, what drives you? Why do you come to work? Like, and you'll probably get generic answers at first, but build enough of a rapport and keep at it, you'll eventually start to uncover that core reason. Start looking at these personality tests. Then you've unlocked something. Then you can start really chipping away. And especially if managers and leaders started looking at everyone in their core squad that they have, of how do I dig up that diamond? How do I bring them to each potential? If you're looking at it like Pokemon, how do I get this Pokemon to the next evolution?
I don't know
Right?
that.
It's all about, like, how do I level up their stats? If you're going to put it in a video game sense,
Mm.
but we're all on the same team, so you're not looking at people as numbers or pawns. You're looking at them as, like, how do I improve this teammate to get to their optimum position?
Well, guess yesterday I went to this event and there was this incredible speaker who was talking about how he, you know, discovering your purpose is the most important, the most important thing for all of us. And if you think about Gandhi, what word comes to mind? Well, he signified peace. Or if you think about Mother Teresa, he signified uh, she signified love. Or if you think about Martin Luther King, it was freedom. So all of these words, and as they, and he put it to the audience. So what would be a word that would encompass your purpose and your mission? And immediately, because this diversity thing is so important to me, what I realized my word, and it came to me instantly, was inclusion. And my
Mm,
drive for inclusion is actually because I've felt so excluded for most of my life.
mm.
And I don't know, it was
Makes
from,
complete sense.
yeah, but a lot of what we're trying to drive or what we're trying to impart on others comes from the part of us within that never really got that ourselves.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And actually, I don't think I know my answer quite yet. It's I can tell what it has been, but I don't think it's that now. And I think that
Creativity? No?
I mean, creativity for at least has come quite naturally. I haven't had to study, or creativity never came from
No,
a
but
place
it's
of
your
purpose.
thing.
It may be something I'm good at, but is it my purpose?
Right, your purpose.
That's
Yeah, yeah.
that's the question I'm really asking.
Mm.
And I think it's okay not to know that just yet. I could throw out a couple of guesses, but if I feel like if I don't know it for sure, it can't be my true purpose yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. Everyone, I'm still trying to figure it out. But it's a very interesting point. I shall have a think.
Right. So I guess then just to recap, we've the the connecting a concept like red monkeys and DISC being low compliance on the DISC personality profiling and diversity mindedness. What we're saying is that organizations that aren't not only moving like aware of these different concepts, but aren't integrating and seeing how they can get these diverse minds to thrive, I think are really gonna lose out in the end.
Mm. Yeah, and dig deep into personalities and build relationships so you can help unlock that person to their fullest potential. If you're a leader, you need to start looking at people like that. That if to use another game analogy, if you're playing a fighting game, they're an unlocked character. They need to work on the game so you can unlock them and play them to their full potential. At least how I see it. I think if a lot of companies took the same approach as football managers or basketball head coaches or something like that, I feel like teams would feel a lot more included and perform a lot better. Because I feel like a lot of times leaders feel like the people they line manage are more of a burden, and they are like, especially if some are less compliant, they become a pain instead of an asset. And I think that mindset shift is all that needs to happen.
Yeah, and if there are any red monkeys out there, please let us know. We want to we want to build our own little island. Well,
Planet the Apes coming soon. That's the episode title now. No, love it, love it. But yeah, it's been great. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for the time.
thank you,
And
James.
everyone, like, subscribe, comment, all that lovely stuff. Please, we need more ideas for more topics. We've got loads already in the bank, but we want them directly from you because this came from an interaction you had with someone who watched the last couple episodes. So
Yes.
this more of that because we can start really kind of doing specials on each of your requests. So
Yeah.
love that.
Thank you. Thanks. See you later.
See you later, guys.
Bye.